This has been one of the craziest GPU generations I think I've ever seen. And AMD is genuinely in a spot that they can make Nvidia hurt. And as a PC gamer, seeing GPU prices finally being dragged back down to a reasonable amount, well, I'm excited. So let's discuss. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie. You're watching GreaterThanPie, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Today we're going to be talking about the GPU wars, and more specifically what AMD just announced and all the cool things that I think a lot of people have glossed over. But before we get there, let's actually talk about why this is the craziest GPU generation by far. To start this generation, we had a third competitor show up. Intel. And Intel showed up with a very, very weird GPU. It doesn't handle old games well, and it handles new games okay, but it definitely fell short of what Intel actually wanted it. Their flagship GPU usually performs very close to a 3060 or the 6600 XT, meaning that their flagship GPU is already not competing with AMD or Nvidia's flagships. That being said, it did have some cool features such as an AV1 encoder, which could make it really useful as an editing workstation type GPU, and really cool features that intertwine with Intel processors. But then we had the big N's big announcement. And let's just say everyone looked at Nvidia and went, those are way too expensive. So they announced the 4090, the 4080, and the 4080. And that may seem weird because now there's a 4090 and a 4080, and that last one has dropped off. And that last one is, well, a very weird case. This was the 4080 12 gigabyte. And this was a weird card. And the reason that this was a weird card was because it was running a different GPU than the GPU in the other 4080. Meaning by calling it a 4080, you were getting completely different performance. And with some leaked benchmarks and a little bit of extra information that we've found out since, it was not going to compete nearly as close to the GPU as you would expect. And the problem is Nvidia named it this way because their actual 4080 was over $1,000. And their 4090 pricing was comparable to the actual price of, well, the 3090. It's in a weird situation with pricing there because that's actually an okay deal, but the 80 series card just was absurd. So they kind of added this extra card that was probably originally supposed to be a 4070 and, well, just called it a 4080. And Nvidia did backpedal on this naming and unlaunched the card. But they are probably going to be relaunching it rather soon as a 4070 Ti. If the pricing stays the same though, they're going to be in for a really, really hard time, particularly with AMD, who is coming in swinging with their GPUs. And on top of that, if it couldn't get any worse for Nvidia here, their new fancy 12-volt cables are having issues. Jay's 2 cents has done like 8 or 9 videos at this point. Gamers Nexus has done a couple. Paul's Hardware has done a couple. The only one who really hasn't done one, I think, is Linus. Digressing a little bit, the reason that this is a problem is, well, this new cable standard, which was already causing controversy from the point it was announced, is, well, starting to become a fire hazard. And now there are a couple of theories going around. One of them is that the cables aren't getting properly plugged in, which is a possibility. And the other one is that there's a bad solder joint, which is also a possibility. Problem is, these cables are made first party from Nvidia, except for the ones that are direct from the power supply. Those are coming from the power supply manufacturers. I am literally mid-edit and I was pulling some footage for the various like cutaway sections and sources. And while I was on WCCFtech, I just found out, and you just saw it back there, it's not a cable problem where it's not plugged in all the way. The first cable that was confirmed to be plugged in all the way has also had this issue. This is not good Like, this might actually be one of the worst outcomes that could possibly happen in a new GPU generation. And I actually genuinely feel bad for Nvidia because their flagship product right now is kind of DOA. So with all of this together, we've got a super expensive GPU. We've got a fire hazard. It puts Nvidia in a weird spot. And it's even weirder due to the fact that the 4090 is actually really compelling for its price. The 4080 is yet to be seen, and unfortunately, I think it's going to kind of, well, it's going to fizzle against AMD for once. And I never thought I'd be saying this, but AMD came out swinging, and they did what they were supposed to do. AMD came out on stage and announced two GPUs, the 7900 XT and the 7900 XTX. Now, the XTX is a new branding for AMD, but it does indicate something rather significant because the way that AMD's product stack works is there's an XT and a standard version. AMD did show off a little bit of performance for the GPUs, and if you take their numbers, recreate their bench, and run competitor GPUs, you can get a pretty good idea of where they're going to stand. Both Linus and Jay's 2 cents did already do this, and they did say to take it with a grain of salt because it may not be absolutely perfect, but it does give us an approximation of where these GPUs will land. Sadly, they're not competing with the 4090 directly, but it doesn't matter because the more expensive of the AMD GPUs comes in at $999 or, well, $1,000, meaning cheaper than the 4080. That's right, AMD is undercutting Nvidia at the top of their line with a new branding. And the best part is it's not even using that 12-volt cable. It's just using regular old PCIe 8 pins. And when you look at the approximated performance, this card is probably going to smoke the 4080. And if it's competing under its price with its performance, it just absolutely mind-blowing to see AMD in this position. And going down the stack, we're probably going to have a small little leapfrog there with the 4080 probably being slightly better than the 7900 XT. And I'm just, as a PC gamer, I'm just excited. To have AMD competing with Nvidia on price this hard means we're probably going to get almost an instant price cut on the 4080. And if we don't, and they just stick to their guns and AMD outperforms them, we're just going to get another price cut at some point. And it works out better for us. But AMD did bring out some interesting features that might make it so that you want to actually go with an AMD GPU over an Nvidia one if you're a content creator. So one of the cool features that I really didn't see too many people talk about is how AMD is making it so that a Ryzen processor with a Radeon GPU will be able to do asynchronous decode. Now, that sounds really weird, and it kind of is as a concept. Essentially, both your CPU and your GPU will be able to handle different encoding and decoding tasks at the same time. So when you're doing something like video editing with Premiere Pro, or even recording a video like this with OBS, there are different commands that run through either the GPU or the CPU in order to encode the video. I currently am using AMD's encoder on my 5700 XT. With this though, I could have the encode task being handled by the GPU and the decode for, let's say, a video stream or upload through the CPU. Now, I don't know exactly if it's going to work that manually. I think it's going to be a automatic button press and everything kind of just works situation. That's the way that AMD made it sound. But for Premiere Pro and OBS, it's going to be a huge win for, well, AMD users who have these kinds of systems. Now, it is going to be relegated to the most recent generations. And with Smart Access Memory, it further incentivizes you to actually buy all AMD in a system, which is a trend that I think is going to continue, as Intel has already shown that they're doing something very similar with their own platform, which is going to leave Nvidia in a weird spot because they're the only ones who don't have a processor company. They tried to merge with ARM and that fell through. So It's going to be interesting in the near future as AMD and Intel, of all places, start to grow their graphics brands. You're going to have entire systems that are going to rely on intercompatibility that is not going to be possible through the Nvidia pipeline. And I think that the craziest thing about all of this is that this GPU will be doing this in a very similar footprint with a very similar power limit to the last generation. And I know this is not going to be much of a hot take, but when I saw that the 4090 was even larger than the giant GPU I already have installed in my gaming PC, I started to get a little concerned. I don't know if I'm the only one who gets concerned about graphics card length and size with their case. Like, I have a big case. I consistently buy big cases because I'm always afraid of under-speccing. It's my personal issue. When you have a GPU that won't even fit into like something like the Fractal Meshify Compact, yeah, you're gonna run into some interesting situations. And it looks like, at least with AMD's current generation, that's not gonna be a problem. So it's very much gonna be a plug and play kind of situation. If you've already got a similar class card, you're gonna be able to jump right into it. I've already made the decision that one of these GPUs is going to be going into my new editing system at some point. And that's because I want to take advantage of the new features. Oh, this GPU also does have the AV1 encoding and has DisplayPort 2.1, which will pretty much future-proof the card for years to come. And I mean, even after you're done using it, you could use that card later on in like a media type box. Now, I have heard some weird things about 8K specifically, and that's mainly that 8K that they and both AMD and Nvidia used isn't really 8K, but at the same time, display standards have been ridiculous for a while. Calling anything any K is weird because before that we measured entirely by the vertical height, the smaller of the pixel counts. So yeah, I'm personally on team. Let's go back to the P's. But hey, but that is where we're gonna end today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, consider giving a like, maybe commenting, subscribing. I do content like this all the time. Let me know, are you going to be buying AMD, Nvidia, or Intel this generation? And if you're not subscribed, I would subscribe because at some point next year, I'm going to be taking one of these GPUs, might even be the 7900 XTX. I'm going to liquid cool it, and I'm going to put it in a brand new hardline liquid cooled editing workstation. That's where we're going to end it. Thank you for watching. Wolfie, out.